On this episode of FieldLink, we dive into the August USDA WASDE report. Jody Lawrence from the FieldLink Market Report joins us to break down how the markets reacted to the bullish news. Plus, he'll discuss how the weather, war, trade, and global supply of grain is impacting today's grain markets. Folks, make plans to join us at the Farm Progress Show in Boone, Iowa on September 1st through the 3rd at the Agronomy Zone. Stop at our booth to view Innovation Never Stops Mobile Learning Center and check out the latest agronomic solutions from Helena in our live demonstration plots. We'll have experts from Helena that cover everything from products, precision ag, seed, and agronomy. We'll also be hosting a live radio show with syndicated host Jesse Allen from Agriculture of America Radio Network. And finally, the guys from Talk Dirt to Me podcast will make their way from West Tennessee to Central Iowa as they host a live podcast featuring some of the latest innovations from the Helena Products Group. For right now, stay tuned for this episode of FieldLink. And welcome back to FieldLink. Joining us, he's on the road again, but Jody Lawrence with FieldLink Market Report. Jody, the WASDE report landed. We've got news hitting the wires, and it's definitely having an impact on the commodities. Jody, welcome back to FieldLink.
Thank you, Bill. Yeah, you introduced me like I was Willie Nelson, but it is field day and time to be on the road, go out and see how everything's looking, and it's good to be. We are at Shopmeyer Ag in Brazil, Indiana, and it was good to visit with everybody here today in the Eastern Corn Belt, which is now becoming a swamp, as we've seen some rain totals that are just shocking. Never seen a too much rain related rally in August, but we certainly are seeing that impact prices. But the big news today, Bill, like you mentioned, was the USDA report. This is always a scary report for everybody because you have a lot of information being poured in the funnel that the USDA, the NASS, RMA, FSA, everybody that can collect information over the summer has collected it, and this is where they start to grind it up into the sausage. And what we saw today, really a combination of two things. We have to take the pre-report trade. The pre-report trade had corn and beans both up 8 to 10. You had wheat up 20 and at one point up 25 overnight. And that was almost entirely based on the more aggressive bombing overnight of Russian ports in the Black Sea by Ukraine. And we are getting to levels of damage and levels of diminished shipping capacity for both Russia and Ukraine that are really going to affect the market and are going to have a very long tail, because you can blow something up in a few seconds that takes years to build and get back to normal. Right. And then when you got that bullish input after yesterday's break in wheat, when they said they were having negotiations with Turkey as a third party to try to open up shipping routes, you end up with this. So the two-war total change of position of information from day to day, we are right in the middle of it. We're right in the middle of it with wheat, Black Sea news, all the crude, diesel, unleaded, and all the energy news, and how that bleeds over into corn and beans from an ethanol and a biodiesel and bean oil. But you take the pre-trade, which was bullish, and everybody was, had it been a standalone day, would have been, hey, we got some realistic movement. But then you had the 11 o'clock central release, and the USDA in this report, you almost have more of a fear of what the USDA could do, because historically they have made some adjustments that have had some pretty bearish price impacts. But what we saw today, even though they raised acreage a little over 1 million for both corn and beans to a new high record total of corn and bean total acreage planting, they cut the yield enough or added back in demand from the 2025-26 marketing year that everything kind of washed out, and you came out at the end with a bullish cut to ending stocks, because this is always the part that's hardest to predict. There's so many columns that come into play and get updated with all new information, that you can have one number, one standalone number, let's just look at the yield, that would have been extremely bullish, and we probably would have had a limit move in corn had they not moved the acres. But when you start, you have to get to the end of the process, to the end of the math problem, to get that all of this equals what, and it equaled both the being able to pencil in the damage from the overnight into, okay, we didn't get kneecapped by the USDA, and it came out even a little bit bullish. We can add that together, and you saw it with today's closes. You have corn going out at the top, major technical breakthrough, closing up over 20 cents, and beans and wheat close to it. Beans high teens, and wheat over 20 cents. So you had a big sigh of relief once the report numbers didn't kill the rally and didn't kill, to where prices were sharply lower. And now with that out of the way, you look at history of these reports and what happens, that historically, if the August report is cut, you see cuts in yields, the crop does not get bigger from that point on. It may not get a lot smaller, but we're not going to go all the way back to 183 for corn, or for, go up to 53.5 or 54 for beans. So there's a lot of a relief rally in this, that people can start to look at numbers from the USDA and have some reliance that, okay, we're not going to see massive changes coming on. And what we haven't even talked about in this, alluded to it at the beginning about how much it's raining in parts of the northern and the eastern Corn Belt, is there was a mini derecho, that's what the Weather Service is calling it, that went through Ohio last night. And if you look at a few of the pictures, you think, oh gosh, this looks like the one in 2020 that caused all the damage. It wasn't quite that, it wasn't as widespread, certainly, but it does show that we are still chipping away at the fringes of what we thought was going to be, a 16.25 billion bushel crop. Now we're down to a 16 and some change, probably a little bit below that, actually. And you start to think that, okay, the worst news, most bearish news, put it that way, because worst is relative to everybody. The most bearish news is potentially all behind us. Now it's just a matter of fine tuning next 6 weeks of weather, the next 6 weeks that go into the September 24th China U.S. Trade Summit in Washington. What happens between then and there? Let's figure out on a day-to-day basis what's going to happen with the two wars.
Right.
And there are other factors we haven't even talked about, but, I've rambled on for 5 or 6 minutes now.
It's a lot of stuff. It's a lot of stuff. And you step back.
That everything is so intertwined that it's impossible just to separate out one number here or one number there without looking at the whole pot of stew and deciding, where fair value should be.
Well, I think the good news out of the report, that you hit on it. We really weren't super surprised with some of the reports that the USDA provided in terms of acreage and that sort of thing. But there were those external factors, Jody, that really nobody's controlling. I mean, who would have thought last night, Ukraine would shoot a bunch of drones over a major port in Russia and going to impact wheat prices at the very same day of this report being released.
We've talked about this administration's flair for the dramatic, and I think that everybody is contributing to that now, because we've got major market. Today was just, the intersection of really more than the 5 stories we talked about of all this news.
Right.
And you see that the market realized that they probably don't have enough risk premium marked into this, because if you start connecting dots and what we think is really interesting. And I was on Chip Flory's program earlier today before the report. And one of the things that we talked about that had nothing to do with the report, we are seeing the impacts and the type of trade now in the wheat market that we expected to see at the beginning, a year into the war, when there would be problems with shipping, where there'd be diminished capacity for exports, where there would have to be workarounds so that you had railroad routes out that are going to make it slower and cheaper and not nearly, I think 10% they have a railroad deal with one of their neighboring countries, but it's only 10% of what they can export. So we are, it took a minute, but we are
3 or 4 years in this case, right? I mean, that work's been going on a while.
Yeah, we're seeing the logic trade back into this. And with Europe's drought, that wasn't even mentioned.
That's right.
In my first, everything I was talking about. With Europe's drought and Black Sea's diminished export capacity, everybody has to look hard around, where is all this going to come from? And right now, it's going to be Northern Hemisphere country, and it's going to be the United States.
Yeah, it's a great point. We've talked weather on this podcast, but not European weather. England, the UK having, 71 to 72% drought, huge impact in crops across the UK right now. And they're virtually not going to be able to do a whole lot, are they?
No, it's just every week a private or a public analytical firm comes out and continues to cut overall EU wheat, corn, small grain yield. And it's only going to get worse because nobody can predict until harvest starts. And I'm sure just like in our 2012, there are a lot of fields already zeroed out. But until you get in there, some of the fields where they think it might be 25% of a yield. If it's lower than that, they may just, keep cutting that yield. But it's certainly, none of it's going to be the highest quality that anybody's going to want. So that's another issue you have to consider in all the things going around the world.
Okay, Jody, we talked a lot about, obviously, the war zones impacting lots of trade and, transportation there. Let's hop off over into Asia. China, we got some things cooking there. They're starting to pick up the pace a little bit. They're probably sitting back looking at this whole global market too, going, where are we going to go now? We got a lot of folks to feed and, livestock to feed as well. We're turning into be one of the few choices left, right?
Yeah, whether they want to buy it from us or not, Brazil and Argentina are still, let's just call it 6 to 8 weeks from serious planting. Even their first earliest corn crop won't come out till early January. So there's 4.5 more months before that hits the market. But you look at China's pace of buying on the daily sales reports shows that they are seriously trying to live up to the May pledge that they were going to buy all these beans from the United States. And heading in, since we're, let's say, a month and 12 days away from Chairman Xi and his entourage coming to Washington for the trade summit, you have to think they're going to do everything to extend all the goodwill they can. Because the other part of this is China, today's report tells them we can't just wait around and think lower prices are coming, because today really kind of defines that if they were looking for, some sort of deep break or just a report-induced break to really ramp up their selling, they didn't get the sale today. They got a price increase, and now they really have to start thinking about a couple things of being able to, all right, we would have loved to buy it 30 cents cheaper, but we're going to have to buy it now because we got to buy it one way or the other.
Yep. They've got stock to fill for sure, and limited markets for sure. Jody, let's go back, peeling that onion back a little further. The acreage side of things, you've touched on it a little bit. We still have 45, 60 days of weather in front of us. Do you see some of those acreage numbers adjusting during the next 30 to 60 days?
Historically, the August report is when the biggest amount of, we had a million plus added to both sides. We don't we don't typically expect any major adjustments to that coming. It'll all be done with yield and export demand as those numbers become more fine-tuned, because by the time you get to the September report, there will be a lot of harvest already in the South. And some of the early planted corn, since we did have a great spring planting season. I've talked to some people who planted some high 90, low 100 day that they were trying to get it out before Labor Day. So by the time we get to there, we'll have some harvested results, not from the big states, but enough of the fringe to be able to know which way the trend is going. And one thing you talk about where to expect the possible wild cards coming up. One thing that I want to commend Secretary Rollins and Tom Kipp, who was a former ambassador and a big farmer, very successful farmer in Indiana. They are going and have started working on a complete overhaul on how the USDA gathers all this information, from yield to acreage to potentially, instead of putting out less reports, putting out more reports, so you don't have these wildly volatile days that we've talked about and have always dreaded. So with more advanced technology, with satellites, with all the things that to a lot of us, it seemed obvious they should have implemented, a decade ago, but now they're getting around to it. So I think not that that's going to change anything in this September, but I did want to see we are heading in a new direction, and it's good to see some change and people willing to acknowledge that they have an antiquated system. But as far as September is concerned, it's probably almost certainly all going to be about yield.
Definitely going to be about yield. Weather, yield is really going to be the main focus domestically over the next, really, like say 30, 60 days. We're going to have a lot of things answered then. Okay, Jody, any marketing advice based on this report? Any suggestions for growers to really maybe take a look at?
Yeah. I know that what everybody is in the process, if you have stored grain, emptying it out so that you've got room, your capacity, and the ease of harvesting your crop to dry it and just be able to move it around on farm without tying up a bunch of your man hours going to the elevator. And we've gotten a great opportunity. I have talked to farmers and elevators alike all across the Corn Belt, and basis right now, considering last year's record crop, or allegedly record crop, is really, really good. So look at your basis plays. If you've got old crop that you need to move, take advantage of today's rally, because the market gave you money. Not to say that the market can't go higher, but we know that it can stall out here and you have a bad basis day or something. So I would certainly have all of my calculations out, have orders in, and be ready to move, because the USDA has given you an opportunity to sell the grain you had in your bin yesterday for more today. And that's all you can ever ask when you're marketing something.
I totally agree. Great opportunity to take advantage of some of these upturns. Who would have ever guessed? Yes, the USDA was on our side this time. The stars were aligned. But as you mentioned on the opening, Jody, we had a lot of other global impact that nobody saw coming. That certainly helped tick that number up a little bit.
One thing that you talk about, September report, the stocks to use ratio came out today for corn, came out at 10.1. Historically, what we look at, if it gets a 9 in front of it in the September report, even if it's 9.99, that's $5 December futures. And we traded up, almost to 480 today. So that's something to keep in mind too, that why you want to stair step those sales orders and think about positive things, because the market certainly has got a not extremely bullish feel, but a well-supported upward momentum to it.
Definitely a lot of opportunity for growers right now to take advantage of some of these upturns. Jody, want to thank you for joining us here on this episode of FieldLink. You and I are going to be together at the Farm Progress Show in Boone, Iowa on September 1st. Looking forward to seeing you there live, Jody. we're going to be sharing some more news and agronomic as well as market information with folks, aren't we?
Yeah, it's going to be great. We're going to have the new trailer out. We can show off our new toy and everybody see it, and looking forward to seeing everybody who comes by the booth and comes out to the show. Hoping for cooler, drier weather.
Yeah, we're looking for that temp to turn down a little bit here in the next several weeks. Hopefully that happens, and looking forward to having everybody out to come out and check out the Innovation Mobile Unit, where we'll have some live demonstrations, bringing our laboratory from Memphis, Tennessee to Boone, Iowa, to show folks how innovation truly never does stop, and we're going to take it on the road. Jody, thanks for joining us on this special episode of FieldLink, and we talk about the WASDE reports, and hopefully growers have an opportunity to take advantage of some of these upturns in the market.
Well, thank you, Bill. It's always good to have a positive report to talk about.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of FieldLink. Be sure to join us September 1st to the 3rd in Boone, Iowa for the Farm Progress Show. We'll be there with the Mobile Innovation Learning Center, because innovation never stops.